So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the Daywalking sage, the true king of all vampires, Naruto x Integra Hellsing. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. A Requiem for the Sun. The rain over Dublin was a persistent, weeping shroud. A dirge of grey mist that clung to the rusted hulls of forgotten cargo ships and turned the corrugated steel of the warehouses into slick, weeping mirrors. It was a miserable night, the kind tea had seeped into the bones and promised a chill that no amount of brandy could fully excise. For the men of Hellsing's Special Operations Unit 11, the chill had nothing to do with the weather. It was the silence, the unnatural, profound, and absolute lack of sound that had descended upon the Liffey Port's sprawling, derelict eastern yard. The comms had gone dead 7 minutes ago, not with a crackle of static or a panicked scream, but with an abrupt, surgical severing. One moment, Sergeant Miles was reporting a strange temperature drop in Warehouse C. The next, there was only the hollow hiss of an open channel receiving nothing. Captain Gareth, a man whose nerves had been forged in the crucible of Balkan black sites and supernatural skirmishes in the London Underground, felt a cold worm of genuine fear squirm in his gut. His 4-man fireteam moved in a tight, practiced diamond, their FN scars with underslung silver core grenade launchers sweeping across the ghost town of shipping containers. The only sound was the drip of water from corroded gantries and the soft, rhythmic crunch of their own boots on gravel and shattered glass. "Optics check," Gareth whispered into his throat mic, a useless gesture he performed out of habit. "Anything." "Negative, Captain," came the clipped reply from Corporal Evans, his voice tight. "Thermals are dead. Just cold spots everywhere. Colder than the ambient fields. All over the damn place, sir. Inconsistent. Like 1,000 cell phones all dying at once." They rounded the corner of a massive, rust-streaked Marsk container, the beam of Gareth's weapon light cutting a frantic white slash through the gloom. And then they saw it. Or what was left of it. Sergeant Miles' team, 4 men, still in their firing stances, huddled back to back in a textbook defensive circle. They hadn't been torn apart, riddled with bullets, or exsanguinated in the typical fashion of a ghoul attack. They were simply empty. Their bodies were rigid, their faces frozen in expressions of quiet, terminal shock. Their skin was the color and texture of ancient parchment, drawn tight over their skulls. Their expensive tactical gear hung loosely on frames that had been instantaneously desiccated, all moisture, all fluid, all life leached out of them in the space of a heartbeat. Dust motes, disturbed by the new team's arrival, danced in the flashlight beams, fine gray dust that puffed from the seams of the dead men's clothing. It was the dust of their own substance, the final residue of what had once been flesh and blood and bone. "God," Evans breathed, the word a prayer and a curse. Gareth's mind raced, cycling through every encounter protocol in the Hellsing organization's extensive bestiary. This wasn't a vampire. Vampires were messy, theatrical. They reveled in blood and viscera. Ghouls were mindless, feral. This was something else. This was clean, efficient, utterly alien. It was an act of consumption on a fundamental level he had never witnessed. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. A shadow detaching itself from other shadows in the deep recesses between 2 containers. It wasn't the lumbering gait of a ghoul or the preternatural glide of a Nosferatu. It was a formless, silent ripple in the air, a patch of darkness that seemed to drink the light. "Contact," Gareth roared, his professionalism snapping back into place. He opened fire, the scar barking a 3-round burst. The rounds, blessed and silver-tipped, didn't strike flesh. They passed through the shape as if it were smoke, whining off the steel container behind it. The shadow surged forward. It had no face, no limbs, no discernible anatomy. It was a vortex of anti-existence, and as it moved, the temperature plummeted. The rainwater puddles at Gareth's feet instantly flash froze, cracking with sharp, gunshot-like reports. The very air seemed to thin, to become brittle. He felt a hideous, intimate pressure against his mind, a psychic scraping that promised not pain, but absolute and total cessation. Annihilation. His team opened up, a roaring cacophony of gunfire that was swallowed by the oppressive silence the thing radiated. Corporal Evans screamed, a choked, gargling sound, as one of the shadows enveloped him. It wasn't a physical attack, it was an absorption. The corporal's rifle clattered to the ground. His body, for one horrifying second, became translucent. The flashlight on his weapon illuminating his skeleton through his rapidly thinning flesh. Then, with a soft whump like a punctured vacuum bag, he collapsed into a pile of gray dust and equipment. Panic, cold and absolute, seized Gareth. He did the only thing a sane man would do. He ran. He didn't know where the other two members of his team went, didn't hear them fall. He just ran, his lungs burning. The abject terror of that silent, consuming void propelling him through the labyrinthine yard. He scrambled over a chain-link fence, tearing his uniform, and didn't stop until the sodium lights of the main port road offered a fragile, pathetic promise of sanctuary. He collapsed behind a dumpster, shivering, weeping, the image of his men turning to dust burned onto the inside of his eyelids. He was still there an hour later when a long, black, armored limousine pulled silently to the curb. The back door opened, and a figure emerged that made the creeping shadows of the night seem mundane. He was impossibly tall and thin, clad in a charcoal suit and a blood-red cravat that seemed to absorb the ambient light. A wide-brimmed hat and a pair of bizarre, orange-lensed glasses obscured his face. But the grin that stretched across his features was a slash of predatory ivory. Alucard, the Hellsing organization's ultimate weapon, breathed in the night air, his inhuman say. NSES tasting the lingering psychic residue of the slaughter. His grin widened, a feral expression of genuine professional interest. Well now, he purred, his voice a low baritone that was equal parts aristocratic charm and graveyard soil. This is new. He flowed through the shipyard, a phantom of red and black, his long coat trailing behind him like the wings of a great, dark bird of prey. He owned the piles of dust and equipment with ease. He knelt, dipping a gloved finger into the remains of Corporal Evans, bringing it to his nose and sniffing delicately. No scent of hellfire, no trace of vampiric taint, no ghoul rot, he mused, his voice echoing slightly in the unnatural quiet. He tilted his head, listening to the secrets the silence held. It smells of nothing. The absolute zero of existence. How deliciously paradoxical. Quote, he felt the presence before he saw it. A crawling on his skin, a subtle fizzing in the unholy power that animated his form. It was a sensation he had not felt in centuries. The feeling of being prey. From the cavernous, dark maw of Warehouse C, they emerged. Not one, but 5 of them. 5 patches of mobile emptiness, 5 ripples in the fabric of reality. They slid across the wet concrete, leaving trails of frost in their wake. A lesser creature would have been paralyzed by the sheer wrongness of their existence. Alucard merely chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. So, the little voids have come out to play, he said, drawing his massive handgun, the .454 Casul. Come then, let's see what sort of requiem you can offer Hellsing's trump card. He fired. The explosive silver round, powerful enough to turn a city bus into scrap metal, tore through the lead entity. And did absolutely nothing. The shadow rippled, disturbed for a moment like a wind-blown curtain, and then reformed. Its silent, inexorable advance continuing unabated. Alucard's grin finally faltered. He fired again, and again, emptying the Casul's magazine in a thunderous roar. Each bullet passed harmlessly through its target. He switched to the Jackal, its 13mm armor-piercing rounds specifically designed to kill regenerators and apostles. The result was the same. Incorporeal, Alucard mused, a flicker of genuine annoyance crossing his features. He let the guns fall to his sides, held in place by some unseen force. Very well, let us try a more personal approach. His form dissolved. A tide of shadows, filled with 1,000 leering, red eyes, erupted from his body, flooding the yard. The air filled with the snarling of spectral hounds and the whisper of damned souls. This was his true power. The terrifying reality of his being. He was not a man, not a vampire. He was a legion, a living nightmare given form. The sea of darkness surged towards the 5 voids, intending to swallow them whole. And the nightmare recoiled. As his shadows touched the Nefesh, they didn't envelop it, they were extinguished. It was like pouring water into a black hole. The snarling hounds whimpered and dissolved. The damned souls shrieked as their ethereal forms were unmade. Alucard felt a jolt of agony, a feedback loop of pure nullity that struck at the very core of his being. It was a pain beyond physical sensation, a spiritual evisceration. He retracted his shadows, his form snapping back into his humanoid shape. He staggered back a step, a hand clutching his chest. His regeneration, the legendary power that could piece him together from a smear of blood, was sputtering. It felt sluggish, choked, as if the very life force that fueled it was being siphoned away. The five voids converged, their silent pressure intensifying. Alucard snarled, a truly feral sound of a cornered predator. He could not shoot them. He could not consume them. His very nature was being negated. So, this is your trick, he hissed, his red eyes glowing with furious light. You do not kill. You unexist. He was forced to do something he had not done since his final battle with the Major. He retreated, not with his usual fluid grace, but in a desperate, staggering flight. He phased through containers, dissolved into fleeting shadows, anything to gain distance. But they were relentless, pacing him effortlessly. One of them surged ahead, cutting him off. It pulsed, and the psychic pressure became a physical force. The ground beneath Alucard buckled. A 20-ton shipping container next to him groaned, the metal compressing and twisting inward as if squeezed by an invisible giant. Alucard cried out, a sound of genuine pain as the force slammed into him. He felt his borrowed souls, the millions of lives he had consumed to build his own immortality, screaming as they were snuffed out, not one by one, but in entire blocks. He threw his arms up, his power flaring in a desperate, final gambit. He focused a sliver of his true essence, the core of the Vampire King, into a single point. A lance of pure darkness and blood magic erupted from his palm, striking the lead entity. For the first time, one of the creatures reacted. It seemed to shudder, its form flickering violently. A low, discordant hum filled the air, a sound that scraped at the nerves and set teeth on edge. The entity dissolved, not into nothingness, but into a fine, gray dust that settled on the ground. But the effort cost him. Alucard fell to one knee, breathing in ragged, unnecessary gasps. His red coat was torn, his body flickering like a faulty projection. He had expended a century's worth of souls to destroy one of them. And 4 remained. They paused, as if considering him, and then, as one, they sank into the concrete, vanishing without a trace. Alucard remained on his knee for a long time, the Dublin rain washing over him. He slowly reached up and touched his chest. The regeneration was working, but it was agonizingly slow. He felt hollow, diminished. He looked at the spot where the creature had been unmade and saw, etched into the metal wall of the warehouse behind it by some unknown energy, a single, 5-letter word in a sharp, angular script that seemed to hurt the eyes. Nefesh. The command center of the Hellsing organization was a cavern of shadows and flickering screens deep beneath the sprawling manor. It was a place of cold steel, colder logic, and the quiet, humming tension of a fortress permanently at war. Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingett's Hellsing stood before the central holographic display, her tall, slender frame ramrod straight, a lit cigarillo clutched in her gloved fingers. The smoke curled around her head like a spectral crown, catching in the light of the tactical maps ND data streams projected in the air before her. Her face, framed by her straight, blonde hair, was an impassive mask, but the glacial blue of her eyes betrayed a storm of controlled fury. Report, she commanded, her voice cutting through the air with the sharp authority of a cavalry saber. Walter C. Dornez, the Hellsing family's loyal butler and one of the deadliest men on the planet, stood at her side. He looked as impeccable as ever in his tailored suit, but the usual wry warmth was absent from his expression, replaced by a grim professionalism. Unit 11 is a total loss, Sir Integra, he stated, his voice calm and measured, belying the horror of his words. 12 operatives are confirmed deceased. Captain Gareth is the sole survivor. He is in medical observation. His psychological state is fragile. And the target? Integra asked, her gaze fixed on the satellite imagery of the Dublin port. Unidentified. Unclassified. Based on Captain Gareth's testimony and the forensic evidence, or lack thereof, we are facing an entirely new category of threat. There were no bodies, Sir Integra. Only dust and equipment. We recovered 12 piles of it. Integra took a slow drag from her cigarillo, the cherry flaring like a distant balefire. And our own pet monster. What is his status? Walter's expression tightened. Alucard has returned. He engaged the hostiles. He succeeded in destroying one, but at a significant cost. He is currently confined to the sub-level dungeons. His regeneration is abnormally slow. He reports a loss of a substantial number of his familiars. He is, to put it bluntly, furious, and more shaken than I have seen him in my lifetime. Integra's knuckles whitened where she gripped the back of a steel chair. For Alucard, their immortal, unstoppable engine of destruction. To be wounded so grievously was more than alarming, it was paradigm-shattering. It was like hearing that the force of gravity had taken a sick day. The word, she said, turning to face Walter fully. The one Alucard found at the scene. Nefesh. I have been cross-referencing it through the Hellsing archives, including your father's most restricted folios, Walter said, tapping a command into a nearby console. A cascade of ancient texts and glyphs appeared on the main screen. Most were dead ends, obscure references in pre-Sumerian demonology. The word itself is archaic, rooted in ancient Hebrew. It translates roughly to soul, or life breath. But in certain forbidden texts, the Gnostic Gospels and the Coptic scrolls of Nag Hammadi, it is used to describe something else entirely. Not demons, which are beings of spirit and hellfire, but anti-beings, things from outside our reality, whose very nature is the negation of life. Soul eaters, the blight, the great emptiness, fairy tales and religious hysteria. Integra scoffed, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Perhaps, Walter conceded, but these fairy tales align perfectly with the physical evidence. The desiccated bodies, the energy drain, Alucard's report of his own power being unmade. These things do not feed on blood or flesh. They feed on existence itself. He paused, bringing up a final, heavily redacted file. It was a scan of a crumbling, hand-written journal entry. There is one other legend that appears alongside the Nefesh, Sir Integra. A myth so outlandish that my predecessors dismissed it as pure fantasy. He magnified the text. It was in a florid, 17th-century script, the journal of a Hellsing field commander stationed in the Carpathians. The blight came upon the village of Brasov, a creeping death that left husks of men and cattle alike. Even the old ones, the Nosferatu of the mountains, fled in terror. They spoke of the Nefesh, the soulless hunger. All our arms were useless. Our faith, our silver, our blessed sciences, all failed. Salvation came from the east. A wanderer. He was not of the night, for he walked freely in the noonday sun. He commanded not the shadows, but life itself. The air around him hummed with power, the very earth seeming to rejoice in his presence. The Nosferatu who witnessed it called him, Sor Intellect, the sun sage. He met the blight not with death, but with a light that scoured them, leaving nothing. He spoke of balance, of a world thrown into discord. And then he was gone. The Daywalking sage, Integra read aloud, the words feeling alien on her tongue. A ridiculous, contradictory title. A vampire who walks in the sun. The texts do not claim he is a vampire, Sir Integra, Walter corrected gently. They are quite specific. They claim he is something else. Something older. The source. A progenitor. He pointed to a map of the British Isles that appeared on the screen. A remote region in the Scottish Highlands was circled in red. For 2 centuries, Hellsing has been monitoring anomalous energy readings from this area. Not demonic, not vampiric. It is a constant, low-level emission of what our sensors can only describe as pure, concentrated life energy. It has always been dismissed as a natural geological phenomenon. But the location corresponds with the last recorded sighting of a figure matching the sage's description from a report filed in 1888. Integra stared at the map, her mind working with cold, ruthless precision. Her organization was founded on a simple principle: to fight monsters, one needs a monster. Her monster was currently wounded, licking his wounds in her basement. And a new, incomprehensible monster was now on the board. Logic dictated a new response. A new weapon. Prepare the helicopter, Walter, she ordered, stubbing out her cigarillo with finality. I will not send a team. I will not risk more men on a ghost story. I will go myself. Sir Integra, that is highly unorthodox and dangerous, Walter protested. The situation is highly unorthodox and dangerous, she countered, her eyes flashing like chips of ice. If this sage is real, he is a power unaccounted for. I will face him myself. If he is a myth, then I have lost nothing but a day. And if he is an enemy, she paused, walking to a display case and retrieving a custom-built, long-barreled handgun. Then he will leer. Why the Hellsing family has kept humanity safe for centuries. The flight north was a transition between worlds. The helicopter left behind the sprawling, ordered geometry of London, a city of stone and glass, and flew into a realm of myth. The Scottish Highlands rose up to meet them, a wild, untamed landscape of brooding mountains, mist-shrouded lochs, and vast, empty moors that seemed to have been painted by a melancholy god. The air itself felt different when Integra stepped out of the aircraft onto a private landing pad. It was crisp, clean, and humming with a strange, almost imperceptible energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. It was the feeling of life, raw and undiluted. Walter had provided her with the manor's exact location. She had ordered the pilot and her security team to wait, proceeding the last kilometer alone on foot. The path led through an ancient wood of Caledonian pines, their branches thick with moss, the ground a soft carpet of needles. There was no sense of menace here. The forest was calm, ancient, and deeply, profoundly peaceful. It was a stark, unsettling contrast to the world of blood and shadows she inhabited. The manor came into view through the trees. It was not the decaying Gothic monstrosity she had expected. It was an old, formidable estate built of dark gray stone, but it was impeccably maintained. Ivy grew in neat, controlled patterns on the walls, and the leaded glass windows shone in the pale morning light. But it was the grounds that gave her pause. The estate was surrounded by a garden of impossible vitality. Roses of a deep, velvety crimson bloomed next to flowers she couldn't name, their colors so vibrant they almost hurt the eyes. A vegetable patch flourished with a bounty that seemed to defy the harsh Highland climate. The entire place pulsed with a quiet, powerful sense of life. Her hand rested on the grip of her pistol, the cold steel a familiar comfort in this unnervingly serene place. She followed a stone-nay path that wound around the side of the house, her polished boots making no sound on the moss-softened stones. She rounded a meticulously trimmed yew hedge and stopped dead. Before her was a rose garden that would have been the envy of any royal palace. And in the center of it, kneeling in the rich, dark earth, was a man. He was not what she expected. He wasn't an ancient creature in archaic clothes. These are a monstrous being hiding its form. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with hair the color of spun gold that caught the morning sun, kissed with streaks of fiery crimson. He wore simple, modern clothing, dark, durable trousers and a plain white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing toned, sun-kissed forearms. He was tending to the roses, his fingers moving with a gentle, practiced care. Trimming a stray leaf here, testing the soil there. And he was doing it all in the full, unfiltered, glorious light of the rising sun. The sight was so fundamentally wrong, so contrary to every law of the supernatural world she knew, that for a moment, her mind simply refused to process it. Creatures of the night did not kneel in the morning sun. They did not cultivate life, they consumed it. As if sensing her presence, he paused. He did not startle or turn quickly. He simply finished his task with a final, gentle pat to the soil around the base of a rose bush, and then rose slowly to his feet. He turned to face her, and she finally saw his face clearly. It was handsome, with strong, defined features, but marked by 3 faint, whisker-like scars on each cheek that gave him a unique, almost feral look. But it was his eyes that captured her. They were a stunning, impossible shade of sapphire blue, as clear and deep as a mountain lake. They held no malice, no fear, no surprise. They held only a calm, ancient, and profound understanding. He looked at her, at the tension in her stance, at the hand resting on her weapon, at the iron will that was her very soul, and he offered a small, sad smile. "Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingates Hellsing," he said. His voice was a calm, steady baritone, with a strange, unplaceable accent that was neither English nor anything else she recognized. It was a voice that held the warmth of the sun and the stillness of a deep forest. "I had a feeling you would be coming. It has been a long time since the Nefesh troubled this world." Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The King and the Queen. The silence that followed his words was a living thing. It stretched between them in the cool Highland air, taut and humming with unspoken questions. "Integra Hellsing, A woman who had faced down popes, monsters, and parliaments without flinching, found herself momentarily adrift. His placid, immediate knowledge of her identity and her pure pose was a strategic gambit she hadn't anticipated, a quiet declaration that he was already several moves ahead in a game she had only just realized she was playing. Her training, her very nature, took over. She quelled the flicker of surprise, encasing it in ice. "Your intelligence network is impressive," she stated, her voice a clipped, level instrument. It was not a question, but an acknowledgement of his opening move. She let her gaze sweep over him, a calculated appraisal. She saw no tells, no nervous tics, no hint of deception. Only a stillness that was more unnerving than any overt threat. "It seems I have been spared the tedious necessity of introductions. You know who I am. I am here because of the events in Dublin. Because of the Nefesh." Naruto inclined his head, a gesture of polite agreement. He took a step back from the rose bushes, turning to face her fully. The sun was at his back, casting his form in a golden corona that made it difficult to see the finer details of his expression. Yet his sapphire eyes seemed to retain their own internal luminescence. "The Nefesh do not operate by the same rules as the creatures you are accustomed to hunting, Sir Integra. They are not beings of spirit or flesh. They are ontological parasites, voids that wear the shape of a shadow. You cannot shoot a hole in the concept of nothing." His words struck a chilling chord, echoing half-mad theories Walter had dredged from the archives. This was no madman spouting folklore. This was a clinical diagnosis. "And you can," she challenged, her tone demanding proof, not belief. "I can," he replied simply, without a trace of arrogance. It was a statement of fact, as mundane as a blacksmith claiming he could shoe a horse. "Their existence is a negation of life. My existence is an affirmation of it. They are the shadow. I am the sun that casts it. We are incompatible." He gestured towards the stone manor, his hand open and inviting. "This is not a conversation for a garden. Please." The air grows cooler. Integra hesitated for only a second. To enter his domain was to cede a degree of control, but to refuse was to appear weak, intimidated. She gave a curt nod and followed him. The interior of the manor was as surprising as its garden. The air was warm and smelled faintly of old paper, beeswax, and brewing green tea. The architecture was ancient Scottish stone and dark wood, but the furnishings were a stark, minimalist blend of Japanese aesthetics and modern functionality. A low, lacquered table sat on a tatami mat in the center of the great room, surrounded by simple floor cushions. On one wall, a massive, flat-screen monitor displayed a silent, scrolling feed of global news headlines. On the opposite wall, hanging in a place of honor, was a simple, unadorned katana, its scabbard a deep, lusterless black. The room was a paradox, a fusion of centuries and cultures, and it was utterly, disarmingly peaceful. Naruto moved with an unhurried grace, preparing tea in a cast-iron tsuban with practiced, economical movements. He did not offer her a seat, nor did he take one himself. He treated her not as a guest to be hosted, but as an equal who had entered his space for a purpose. "Your organization has existed for over a century," he began, his back to her as he measured out the tea leaves. "Founded by Abraham van Helsing. Your purpose? To protect the Crow and the Protestant faith from all supernatural threats. Your primary asset is a captured vampire of immense power, known as Alucard. You believe him to be the original, Vlad III Dracula. You were mistaken on that point, but his power is, for this world, considerable." Integra's blood ran cold. The true nature of Alucard was Helsing's most guarded secret, a truth known to no more than 3 living people. For him to speak it so casually was a violation, a surgical intrusion into the very heart of her power. Her hand tightened on her pistol. "You have been watching us," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Watching is a limited word," he corrected, turning to face her, a steaming cup in each hand. He placed one on the low table. "I feel the ebb and flow of life on this planet. The sudden appearance of a dozen little vacuums of existence, followed by the significant dimming of a very bright, very old, and very angry flame, it warrants my attention. Dublin was not the first incident. It was merely the first one you noticed." He gestured to the large screen. At his unspoken command, the news feed was replaced by a global map. Dozens of small, red dots appeared, scat. Read across the globe in remote locations. A mining colony in Siberia. A favela on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro. A fishing village in rural Japan. They have been testing the waters, Naruto said. Small incursions. Now, they have grown bold. They have attacked a major city. They have tasted a power like Alucard and found it to their liking. They will want more. They will begin to swarm. Integra stared at the map, the full, terrifying scope of the threat settling upon her like a lead weight. This was not a localized incident. This was a global invasion, and she had been utterly blind to it. Why? She demanded. Why now? Because something has called them, Naruto answered, his blue eyes distant, as if looking at a history only he could see. They are drawn to great concentrations of power. To moments of instability. Your world, it has become very loud, spiritually speaking. And something has opened a door I thought long closed. He took a slow sip of his tea, his gaze returning to her, sharp and focused. But the why is irrelevant to you right now. You are here for the how. How to stop them. And the answer is, you cannot. My organization has faced down armies of the undead and the legions of hell. Integra shot back, her pride stung. We will find a way. You will find a grave, he countered, his voice losing its warmth, becoming as hard and unforgiving as the Highland stone. Your bullets are blessed objects, designed to destroy unholy flesh. The Nefesh have no flesh. Your faith is a shield against spiritual corruption. The Nefesh have no spirit. They are a physical law, Sir Integra. An equation of entropy. You are trying to shoot mathematics. You will fail. Your men will die. Your monster will be consumed. And your world will be scoured clean of all life, leaving behind a silent, sterile ball of dust. He let the words hang in the air, a death sentence delivered with absolute conviction. He was not threatening her. He was educating her. I require your assistance, Integra stated. Forcing the words out, it was a concession that tasted like ash in her mouth. Name your price. A flicker of something, amusement, perhaps, danced in his eyes. My price is not something you can offer. Sir Integra, I do not require money, for I have no need of it. I do not require sanctuary, for this is my own. I do not require fealty, for I am not a dog to be leashed and sicked on your enemies. He set his cup down and walked towards her, his presence filling the room. He stopped a few feet away, his height forcing her to tilt her head back slightly to meet his gaze. For the first time, she felt physically intimidated, a sensation so foreign it was disorienting. Here are my terms, he said, his voice low and absolute. This is not a contract of employment. It is an alliance. You will grant me full operational command in all matters concerning the Nefesh. Your resources, your intelligence, your personnel, they will be at my disposal, to be used as I see fit. You will answer my questions. You will conceal nothing from me, and you will afford me the respect of a sovereign, not a soldier. In return, I will eliminate the Nefesh threat. And I will show you how to truly fight the darkness that is coming for your world. He offered his hand. I am Naruto Uzumaki, and this is the only deal you will be offered. Accept it, or face annihilation alone. Integra stared at his outstretched hand. It was a declaration of conquest disguised as an offer of aid. He was demanding she surrender a portion of her sacred authority, the absolute control that defined her existence. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to raise her gun and put a bullet between his calm, confident eyes. But she was not a fool. She was a pragmatist above all else. She had come here seeking a weapon. And she had found a king. A king who held the only key to her world's survival. With a will of pure iron, she sheathed her pride. Her gloved hand met his. His grip was firm, warm, and pulsed with a barely contained energy that felt like touching a power line. Agreed, partner, she said, the word feeling strange and ill-fitting. A slow smile spread across Naruto's face. It was not a smile of triumph, but of grim satisfaction. Good. Then let's begin by visiting your kennel. It's time I met the family dog. The sub-level dungeons of Hellsing Manor were a place of absolute cold and absolute shadow. A prison designed to hold a god. Alucard sat upon a throne of carved obsidian that seemed to have been clawed from the very bedrock, his long limbs draped over it in an affecta. Cheon of languid boredom that did nothing to hide the furious, volcanic energy roiling within him. The damage the Nefesh had done was more than physical. It was an existential wound. He felt the absence of the souls they had scoured from him, a hollow void amidst the cacophony of his internal legion. His power was diminished. His pride, a thing more ancient and vast than any mountain, was grievously wounded. A soft click echoed in the vast chamber as the reinforced steel door opened. Walter entered, pushing a silver trolley laden with a single, IV bag filled with medical-grade blood. "Your evening meal, my lord," the butler said, his voice betraying no emotion. Alucard's red eyes snapped open, glowing like embers in the oppressive dark. "I am not hungry for that swill," he snarled, his voice a gravelly echo. "Bring me a traitor, a heretic. Let me taste their terror. I need to replenish my strength." "I'm afraid our stock of heretics is rather low this evening," Walter replied calmly, setting up the IV stand. "This will have to suffice. Sir Integra's orders." Alucard laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "The little master grows bold. She finds a new beast in the garden and thinks she no longer needs her old hound." His gaze sharpened, pinning Walter with an intensity that would have stopped a mortal's heart. "You've seen him, haven't you, my old friend? The angel of death in the morning sun. Tell me, Walter, what is he?" Quote. Walter paused in his work, his back to the vampire. "He is something new, Alucard. Or perhaps, something very, very old. He radiates a power I cannot comprehend. It feels clean, clean." Alucard spat the word like a curse. "There is no clean power. There is only power, and mine is the greatest this world has ever known. This usurper comes into my home, to hunt my prey. He will find this territory is already claimed." He rose from his throne, his form seeming to unspool from the shadows, growing taller, more menacing. "When he arrives, I will tear him apart. I will drink his life and add his power to my own. I will show him, and I will show Integra, that there is only one true monster in the Hellsing organization." Walter turned, his aged face unreadable. "I would advise against that course of action," he said softly. "I do not believe he is a foe you can defeat by conventional means." "I am anything but conventional," Alucard whispered, his grin returning. "A promise of bloody-minded, glorious violence." His senses, still sharper than any on earth, picked up the approaching footsteps from floors above. Multiple sets. Integra. A few soldiers, their hearts beating a frantic, frightened rhythm. And another. A presence as calm and steady as the North Star. A font of brilliant, blinding life that felt like a physical affront to his shadowy nature. He was here. Alucard's grin widened until it was a grotesque slash across his face. "The challenger has arrived at the Colosseum. Let the games begin." Sarah's Victoria felt him long before she saw him. It was a sensation utterly alien to her fledgling vampiric senses. When Alucard was near, she felt a crawling cold, a primal fear that spoke of the grave and ancient predation. When she was near Naruto, it felt like standing in the first warm sun after a long, bitter winter. It was an overwhelming, almost painful infusion of pure life. It made her fangs ache and her dead heart flutter with a phantom beat. She stood at attention with a squad of Hellsing commandos as Sir Integra led the man, the myth, down the spiral staircase to the dungeon. She saw him now, the golden red hair, the impossible blue eyes, the calm, confident stride. He wasn't radiating power like a furnace, he was simply full of it, a vessel containing an ocean of energy, utterly at peace with itself. He glanced at her as he passed, and for a second, his gaze lingered. He didn't look at her with the contempt or pity she often saw. He looked at her with a surgeon's diagnostic eye, seeing not just the police girl or the vampire, but the tangled, warring energies within her. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before turning his attention back to the massive steel door ahead. Integra stopped before the door. "Alucard is beyond this point," she said to Naruto, her voice all business. "He is weakened, but he is also enraged and unpredictable. He sees you as a threat to his position. He will attack you. Do not underestimate him." "I have not underestimated anyone in a very long time, Sir Integra," Naruto replied, his gaze fixed on the door. He could feel the raw, chaotic power churning on the other side. A maelstrom of death and shadow, held in check by will and ancient seals. "Open it." With a heavy groan of protesting metal, the great door swung inward, revealing the cavernous darkness of Alucard's sanctum. From the shadows, two red eyes ignited. So, the pretender has come, Alucard's voice echoed, slithering from every corner of the room at once. You reek of the sun. It offends me. I believe I will extinguish your light and feast on the darkness that remains. Naruto walked into the chamber alone, the door sealing shut behind him. He stood in the center of the room, his hands in his pockets. Making no move, offering no threat. He simply observed. You are a library of stolen lives, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the oppressive gloom. A cacophony of screaming souls bound to a single, arrogant will. You call it immortality, I call it a prison of your own making. Alucard materialized before him, not as a man, but as a towering pillar of blackness. A writhing mass of shadows and eyes. A psychic wave of pure terror slammed into Naruto, an assault designed to shatter the minds of lesser beings. Naruto didn't even blink. His mind was a placid lake. The psychic attack a mere pebble dropped into its infinite depths, its ripples vanishing instantly. You will not speak to me of prisons, you pathetic little sun god. Alucard roared, his shadow form lashing out. Tendrils of living darkness, tipped with snarling Baskerville hounds, shot towards Naruto, intending to rip him to shreds. Naruto still didn't move. He simply raised one hand, his palm open. He exhaled slowly, and a soft, golden light bloomed from his palm. It was not a harsh, burning light, but a warm, gentle radiance. As the shadows of Alucard's attack touched the light, they did not recoil or burn. They simply ceased to be. They unraveled, dissolving into nothingness like mist in the morning sun. The snarling hounds whimpered and vanished. The entire, Fying assault was negated before it could even reach him. Alucard's form snapped back to his humanoid shape, his eyes wide with disbelief. What is that? Sage energy, Naruto explained calmly. The energy of life itself. It is the antithesis of your power, which is built on a foundation of death. You cannot touch me with your shadows, Alucard, because where I stand, they cannot exist. With a scream of pure fury, Alucard abandoned his esoteric powers and lunged, his physical speed a blur that would have been invisible to any human eye. His gloved hand, fingers sharpened into claws that could shear through steel. Aimed for Naruto's throat. Naruto's movement was almost too subtle to be seen. He didn't dodge so much as shift his weight, a simple, fluid turn from the hip. Alucard's claws missed by a millimeter. At the same time, Naruto's hand came up, not in a strike, but with two fingers extended. He tapped Alucard lightly on the chest. It was not a blow. It was a connection. A tsunami of pure, golden life energy flooded Alucard's being. It was not an attack. It was a restoration. The gaping spiritual wound left by the Nefesh was instantly cauterized. The hollow void where High's souls had been scoured away was filled. The sluggish, sputtering engine of his regeneration roared back to life, stronger and purer than it had been in a century. He was instantly, completely, and perfectly healed. Alucard stumbled back, clutching his chest, his breath hitching. He was whole again. His power was his own. He stared at Naruto, his mind, for the first time in 500 years, utterly and completely silent with shock. The rage was gone, replaced by a terrifying, humbling understanding. This man had not come to fight him. He had not come to defeat him. He had come to demonstrate, in the most absolute and undeniable way possible, that the very concept of a conflict between them was absurd. He had nullified Alucard's most powerful attack with a flick of his wrist and then, with a simple touch, had gifted him back the very power he had lost. It was the ultimate expression of dominance. An act of mercy so profound it was more humiliating than any physical defeat. Your power is a raging, uncontrolled fire, Naruto said, his voice soft again. You burn everything around you, including yourself. You think it makes you strong. It only makes you a slave to your own thirst. He turned his back on the speechless vampire, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. You will serve Hellsing, and through them, you will serve this alliance. Learn control, learn balance, or the next time the Nefesh come for you, I will let them finish the job. He walked to the door, which opened at his approach. He stepped out into the corridor, leaving Alucard standing alone in the darkness, whole in body but shattered in pride. Integra, Walter, and Sarah stood waiting. They had seen the flashes of light, heard the initial roar, and then, nothing. Integra's eyes bored into Naruto, demanding an answer. He will be more cooperative now, was all Naruto said. He walked past them and up the stairs. Integra watched him go, 1,000 calculations running through her mind. She then turned her gaze to the open dungeon door. Alucard stood in the shadows, unmoving. She could feel it, even from a distance. His power was restored, but his arrogance, the defining trait of his entire existence, was gone, replaced by a sullen, grudging silence. She had sought a new weapon to fight a new war. What she had acquired was a new master. Later, in the command center, the global map was once again on display. The red dots were increasing in number. Walter delivered a fresh report. "We have confirmed sightings now in Berlin and Johannesburg," the butler said grimly. "The pattern of escalation is accelerating." Integra stood beside Naruto, both of them staring at the map. The atmosphere was no longer one of a commander and her asset. It was a council of war between two sovereigns. "You said they were called by something," Integra stated. "What is it? Where do we strike?" Naruto touched the screen, his fingers tracing a line from a point in Central Asia towards Europe. "They are not a mindless plague. They have a destination, a purpose." His eyes narrowed, a cold, hard light entering them. "They are seeking out the other pieces. The other artifacts that first opened the way for their kind into this world, long ago." He looked at Integra, the true weight of their new reality settling upon them both. "Our war has just begun. And your world is the battlefield." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Shepherd and the Lamb. The roar of the Hellsing organization's modified state Route 71 Blackbird was a savage hymn to speed, a sound that tore a seam across the stratosphere. Inside the cramped, high-tech cabin, the noise was a muted, bone-deep vibration. Sarah's Victoria sat strapped into a tactical jump seat, her hands, clad in white gloves, resting on the stock of the monstrous Harkonnen cannon that lay across her lap. Her gaze was fixed out the quartz porthole, upon the impossible, gentle curve of the earth, a breathtaking vista of blue and white set against the velvet black of the void. It should have been a moment of awe. Instead, her stomach was a knot of anxiety. Across from her, Naruto Uzumaki was a picture of perfect tranquility. He wore a lightweight, dark gray combat suit of a material she didn't recognize, which moved with him like a second skin. He wasn't looking out the window. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and even. He wasn't sleeping. He was meditating, his presence a placid anchor in the violent, physics-defying rush of their insertion. Approaching drop zone. 5 minutes, the pilot's voice, filtered and tinny, crackled through the cabin's intercom. Atmospheric entry commencing. "It's gonna get a little toasty, folks." Sarah's knuckles tightened on her weapon. "Governor?" she asked, her voice a little too loud in the confined space. Naruto's eyes opened, the sapphire blue clear and alert. "Yes, Sarah's." "Why me?" she blurted out. "Why just me? Hellsing has entire platoons of seasoned operators. Men who've fought ghouls since before I was born. And, well, there's Master." The unspoken name of Alucard hung in the air between them. The great vampire had been silent since Naruto's demonstration, confining himself to the deepest part of the manor. Sir Integra had made no move to command him. And he had made no move to volunteer. It was a silent, sullen standoff. "The Hellsing soldiers are excellent at their jobs," Naruto replied, his voice calm and steady over the increasing roar of atmospheric friction. "They are experts at killing things that are alive, however unholy. The Nefesh are not alive. Against them, your soldiers' experience is a liability. It will get them killed." "And Master," she pressed, unable to stop herself. "Alucard's power is a hammer," Naruto explained patiently. "A magnificent, terrifyingly effective hammer. But this is not a nail. This is a poison. Striking it with a hammer will only shatter the vial and spread it further. His very nature, the legion of dead souls he commands, is a feast for the Nefesh. For him to fight them is to feed them." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze direct and piercing. "I brought you, Sarah's, because you are neither. You are not a human relying on flawed tactics, nor are you a monument to death like your master. You are potential. You stand on a precipice between two states of being. You feel the pull of the blood, of the grave, but the memory of the sun is still fresh. The Chi makes you uniquely suited to learn what I have to teach." The floor of the aircraft shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere, a halo of superheated plasma glowing orange outside the porthole. Sarah's felt the words sink in. He wasn't treating her as a sidekick, a fledgling, or a police girl. He was treating her as an apprentice with a unique gift. It was a validation she had never received from Alucard. A respect she'd never truly felt from anyone but Sir Integra, and even that was the respect of a commander for a useful weapon. The target is a nexus point below the Basilica of St. John Lateran in Rome. Naruto continued, pulling up a holographic map between them. It showed the ancient, sprawling catacombs beneath the city. Walter's intelligence picked up a high-level energy. Why reading consistent with a forming Nefesh nest? They are drawn to places of deep historical and emotional resonance. The faith, the death, the sheer weight of centuries of human life, it creates a spiritual residue they can metabolize. So, what's the plan? Sarah's asked, her confidence building. We go in, big guns blazing, and turn the place into a crater. Naruto shook his head. No, the plan is, you are going to learn to see. Their entry into Rome was silent and unseen. They didn't land at an airport but performed a halo, high-altitude, low-opening jump from 30,000 feet. They are dark forms arrowing through the night sky. Naruto guided their descent with subtle manipulations of wind currents, landing them with barely a whisper in the deserted courtyard of a cloistered convent. That Hellsing maintained as a local safe house. Within minutes, they were changed into inconspicuous civilian attire and moving through the vibrant, chaotic streets of the Eternal City. The transition was jarring. To go from the sterile silence of the stratosphere to the rich, sensory overload of Rome was a shock. The smells of espresso, exhaust fumes, and ancient stone mingled in the air. The sounds of Vespa scooters, passionate arguments, and distant church bells filled the night. To Sarah's, it was a beautiful, painful reminder of a life she could no longer lead. She saw couples laughing, families eating gelato, and felt the chasm between herself and them widen with every step. Naruto, however, moved through the crowd with an easy, unbothered grace. He seemed to drink in the life around him, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. He was not a creature of the night hiding from the day. He was a part of the vibrant, living world, in a way she, and certainly Alucard, could never be. Their destination was an unassuming, wrought iron gate that led to a rarely visited section of the catacombs. Naruto produced a key that looked older than the city itself and opened the rusted lock. The moment they stepped through, the world changed again. The warm, lively air of the city was replaced by a sudden, tomb-like chill. The scent of life was replaced by the smell of damp earth, cold stone, and the dry, chalky odor of bone dust. Naruto paused just inside the entrance, the heavy iron gate closing behind them with a deep, resonant clang. The only light was a single, bare bulb that cast long, dancing shadows down the narrow, descending stone staircase. All right, Sarah's, he said, his voice a low whisper that carried perfectly in the enclosed space. Your Hellsing training has taught you to rely on your eyes. Your enhanced vision, your thermal optics. Forget them. They are useless here. The Nefesh do not have a heat signature. Visually, they are barely more than a ripple in the dark. So, how am I supposed to see them? She asked, her hand instinctively going to the night vision scope on the Harkonnen, which she now carried in its more compact, semi-assembled state. You don't. You feel them, he instructed. Your master gave you the power of a vampire, but you are still using the senses of a human. A vampire's true strength is not in its eyes, but in its perception of life and death. Close your eyes. Sarah's hesitated. In the dark. Are you mental? The dark in front of your eyes is irrelevant. It's the dark within the world you need to perceive. Trust me, Sarah's. Close them. Reluctantly, she complied. The world dissolved into blackness, and her other senses immediately sharpened. She could hear the drip of water 100 yards down the tunnel. She could smell the different kinds of mold growing on the walls. She could feel the subtle vibrations of the city above them through the soles of her boots. Good. Naruto's voice was close, calm, and reassuring. Now, stop listening to the world. Stop smelling it. Stop feeling it. Reach out with your spirit, your core. Feel the energy of this place. It's faint, but it's there. The echo of every person who was buried here. The faint life of the insects and the mold. The roots of the trees from the world above, pushing through the stone. It all has a presence, a faint hum of existence. Can you feel it? Sarah's concentrated, pushing past her physical senses. It was like trying to tune a radio to a station that was almost out of range. At first, there was only static. But then, slowly, she began to feel it. A subtle, tingling web of something. A quiet, pervasive energy. The hum of life he described. It was faint, but it was undeniably there. I think so. It's quiet. Exactly, Naruto affirmed. Now, search for the silence. The nefesh are holes in that web. They are pockets of absolute, total silence in the music of existence. Don't look for the shadow. Feel for the hole it leaves in the world. That is how you will see them. He fell silent, and Sarah's was left to float in the darkness, concentrating on this new, alien sense. She extended her perception down the dark tunnel ahead, sifting through the faint hum of life. And then she found it. A spot, a patch of nothing. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void where the quiet hum should have been. It was a deafening silence. And it was moving. There, she whispered, her eyes still closed. About 50 meters ahead, around the corner to the right. There are 3 of them. She felt a hand on her shoulder, and Naruto's voice was filled with a teacher's pride. Good, very good. Now, open your eyes. She did. The tunnel was just as dark and empty as before. She could see nothing with her vaunted vampiric vision. But now she knew they were there. She could feel the 3 gaping holes in reality, lurking just around the bend. The lesson is not over, Naruto said, his hand dropping from her shoulder as he began to walk forward, his footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. Let's go to school. They found the first chamber, a circular room where the tunnel widened, the walls lined with thousands of skulls staring from hollow sockets. And in the center, the 3 voids she had sensed were coalescing, their shadowy forms rippling as they detected the sudden, rich banquet of life that had entered their domain. This is a simple trap, Naruto said, his voice conversational, as if lecturing a student in a classroom. He didn't even look at the creatures. His attention was entirely on Sarah's. They sense your life force, your emotional state. Your fear and anxiety are like seasoning on the meal. They are expecting you to panic, to fire your large, loud weapon and give away your position to the rest of the nest. What are you going to do? Sarah's took a deep breath, pushing down the ingrained instinct to raise the Harkonnen and blast the things to kingdom come. Feel the hole, she focused, pinpointing their locations not with her eyes, but with that new internal sense. They were preparing to lunge. I'm going to be where they ain't, she muttered, channeling her training as a police officer and the raw, explosive power of her vampire muscles. She exploded into motion. In a blur of speed, she wasn't running at them or away from them, but around them, her movements fluid and unpredictable. The 3 nefesh surged forward, aiming for the spot where she had been a microsecond before, their attacks converging on empty air. As they overshot, Naruto moved. He wasn't a blur of speed like Sarah's. He simply was. One moment he was by the wall. The next he was between the 3 creatures. He held a small, glowing sphere of golden energy in his palm, about the size of a marble. A Rasengan, compressed to its absolute densest point. He didn't thrust it or throw it. He opened his hand. The sphere didn't explode. It expanded, releasing a wave of pure, silent life energy. It wasn't hot or destructive. It was a wave of pure presence. When it washed over the 3 nefesh, they convulsed violently. Their shadowy forms flickered and tore, not from damage, but like a projection trying to display on a screen that was suddenly flooded with pure white light. With a trio of soft, final hisses, they dissolved into nothing, leaving behind only the cold, damp air. Lesson 2, Naruto said, turning back to Sarah's. Do not fight their nothingness with your substance. Overwhelm it with your presence. Your life force, as a vampire, is a potent weapon if you learn to project it, instead of just containing it. We will work on that. He started walking down the tunnel again, leaving a stunned Sarah's to hurry after him. He had just dispatched 3 of the creatures that had nearly killed Alucard, and he'd done it with less effort than swatting a fly. He wasn't just fighting. He was actively, methodically teaching her, even in the heart of enemy territory. Gratitude, admiration, and a healthy dose of hero worship began to bubble inside her. They delved deeper, moving through a labyrinth of bone-filled tunnels. With every step, Sarah's grew more attuned to the new sense, guiding them, pointing out ambushes and lurking hunters with increasing confidence. Naruto would then dispatch them with an almost casual efficiency, each time using a slightly different application of his sage energy, forcing her to observe and learn. Finally, they felt it. A vast, cavernous silence ahead, the heart of the nest. They emerged into a vast, unnatural grotto, a place where the narrow catacomb tunnels opened into a colossal underground space that should not have existed beneath Rome. In the center of the grotto, dozens of nefesh swirled and eddied around a pulsating core of utter blackness, a rift in space that seemed to be vomiting them into reality. But they were not alone. Standing before the rift, her back to them, was a woman. She was clad in practical, earth-toned clothing, sturdy boots, dark canvas trousers, and either jerkin covered in pouches and loops. Her long, dark hair was braided with what looked like twigs and feathers. She held a gnarled wooden staff in one hand, and with the other, she was tracing glowing, turquoise symbols in the air. The symbols linked together, forming a complex, shimmering cage of light that was slowly, painstakingly enclosing the rift. The air around her crackled with power, smelling of ozone, damp soil, and crushed herbs. She was a witch. Bloody hell, Sarah's breathed. Who's that? Someone who understands the enemy, Naruto said, his eyes narrowed in appreciation of the woman's power. The energy she was using was different from his own, wilder, more chaotic, but it was undeniably a form of life magic. Earth magic. The witch must have sensed them. She spun around, her staff leveled, her face a mask of fierce concentration. She was younger than Sarah's had expected, with high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of moss after a fresh rain. Her gaze fell upon them, and her expression hardened with immediate hostility. She saw the simmering vampiric power in Sarah's, and the colossal, sun-bright energy in Naruto. So, the woman said, her voice a low, melodic alto with a thick, rolling Romanian accent, "The jackals have come to the carcass. I should have known this much rot would attract the greatest of the undead. You are far from your dark castles, Strigoi. We're not here to fight you." Sarah's called out, taking a step forward. "Be still, fledgling," the witch commanded, a ring of turquoise light flaring around her staff. "Your master reeks of a power that perverts nature. You think to harness this blight, to turn it to your own dark ends. I will send you and your golden-eyed king back to the dust you crave." Before Naruto could intervene, the situation exploded. The nefesh, sensing the conflict, surged forward, attacking all three of them at once. The witch grunted, a portion of her energy cage flickering as she spun her staff, sending a wave of concussive force made of solidified air to scatter a group of shadows. Sarah's, reacting on instinct, brought the Harkonnen to bear, unleashing a deafening volley of explosive rounds that tore through the creatures. Buying a precious few seconds. Naruto sighed. So much for diplomacy. The grotto devolved into a chaotic, three-way battle. Sarah's laid down a curtain of suppressive fire, our newfound senses allowing her to track the nefesh and led her shots with uncanny accuracy. The witch was a whirlwind of defensive magic, glowing wards appearing on the cavern walls to block the creatures' paths. Thorny vines erupting from the ground to ensnare them, and bolts of raw, green energy leaping from her staff to disrupt their forms. Naruto moved through the chaos, a point of absolute calm in the storm. He wasn't fighting for territory or survival, he was dissecting the battlefield. He saw the witch's magic struggling to contain the sheer number of foes. He saw Saras's ammunition running low. He saw the nefesh beginning to coordinate, their swarm intelligence focusing on the witch, the biggest immediate threat to their rift. He acted. He blurred past Sarah's, appearing at the witch's side. She snarled and tried to bring her staff around to strike him, but he simply placed a hand on it. "Your magic is strong," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "It speaks the language of the earth. But you are trying to build a dam with stones when you should be redirecting the river." The witch froze, her eyes wide. When he touched her staff, she hadn't felt the cold, draining touch of the undead. She had felt a staggering infusion of pure life, a warmth that resonated with her own power, amplifying it, purifying it. She felt the strength of an ancient forest, the purity of a mountain spring. Her moss-green eyes stared at his sapphire ones, and for the first time, she saw not a vampire, but something else. Something holy. Who? What are you? She breathed. An ally, Naruto replied. He looked at the swarming Nefesh, who were now massing for a final, overwhelming assault. Hold them for 3 seconds. She didn't question him. She slammed the butt of her staff into the ground. A massive wall of interwoven roots and glowing runes erupted from the floor, blocking the Nefesh's advance. It was a barrier of pure, defiant life. That was all the time Naruto needed. He rose into the air, his hands coming together in a familiar seal. Golden sage energy swirled around him, but it wasn't forming a sphere. It was being drawn into his lungs, his body becoming a capacitor for an immense amount of power. Sage art. Soul breaker howl. He didn't scream. He opened his mouth and projected. A torrent of pure, concentrated life energy, given the form and force of a sonic weapon, erupted from him. It wasn't a beam of light, but a wave of invisible, overwhelming reality. The effect was absolute. The Nefesh didn't just dissolve. They were erased. The black rift at the center of the grotto shuddered violently. The energies holding it open shredded by the sonic blast of pure life. The roots of the witch's barrier turned golden and sprouted flowers before crumbling to dust, their purpose served. The entire swarm, the rift, the oppressive cold, it was all gone. Silence returned to the grotto, broken only by the drip of water and the ragged breathing of Ceres and the witch. Naruto landed softly on the ground, the golden aura around him receding. He looked at the witch, who was staring at him with an expression of profound, religious awe. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said, and I believe we have a common enemy. The witch slowly lowered her staff, giving him a deep, respectful bow. My name is Eleonora Vasile. I am a guardian of the old ways. And it seems the old prophecies were true. She looked up, her green eyes filled with a new, fervent light. The Sun Sage has returned. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Paladins and Paradoxes. The holographic globe dominating the Hellsing Command Center was no longer a tactical map, it was a wound chart for a dying world. The scarlet pinpricks of confirmed Nefesh activity were multiplying, a virulent rash spreading across the continents. Rome had been a victory, a successful amputation, but the infection was systemic. Naruto Uzumaki, Sir Integra Hellsing, and their newly acquired, still wary ally, Eleonora Vasile, Street. Ood before it like surgeons contemplating a terminal diagnosis. Ceres Victoria stood slightly behind them, a silent sentinel, her posture radiating a new, quiet confidence. The energy signature of the Rome rift has vanished completely, Walter reported, his voice crisp as he analyzed a stream of data on a secondary screen. Your methods were conclusive, Mr. Uzumaki. It was a temporary gate, a symptom, Naruto stated, his gaze fixed on the globe. They will open another. They are probing, searching for something. They search for the keystones, Eleonora added, her voice a low, earthy murmur. That seemed strangely resonant in the high-tech, sterile environment. She was dressed in a simple, dark green tunic and trousers, looking like a forest druid who had taken a wrong turn into a military bunker. In the old tongue, they are the cicatrices, the scars. Places where your world was wounded long ago by beings from beyond. These wounds never truly healed. They are weak points in the fabric of what is. The Nefesh are drawn to them like flies to a festering wound. Integra took a long, thoughtful drag from her cigarillo, the smoke wreathing her face. And these scars, can they be located? My coven has maps, ancient ones, written on hide and stone, Eleonora said. But they are imprecise, speaking in riddles of the place where the mountain wept, or the island that breathes smoke. To pinpoint them would take time. Quote, time we don't appear to have, Walter interjected grimly, turning from his console. His usual unflappable demeanor was strained. Sir Integra, I have an urgent communication. A priority 1, alpha-level request. Integra raised a skeptical eyebrow. From whom? Vatican City. Section 13. Iscariot. The name fell into the room with the weight of a guillotine blade. Ceres stiffened. Eleonora's lips curled into a faint, contemptuous sneer. Iscariot. The Vatican's fanatical, monstrous Black Ops division. Hellsing's eternal rivals, the other side of the sea. Oin in the secret war for humanity's soul. They were zealots, butchers, and true believers, men and women who would gladly burn the world to save it from damnation. What do those Catholic lunatics want? Integra demanded, her voice laced with aristocratic disdain. A meeting, Walter replied. Here, in London. They want to meet with the new power that cleansed Rome. They wish to meet with Mr. Uzumaki. Absolutely not, Integra snapped. I will not have a pack of Vatican attack dogs sniffing around my territory. Deny the request. With respect, Sir Integra, perhaps you should reconsider, Naruto said, turning from the globe. His expression was calm, thoughtful. They are a major player on this board. To ignore them is to invite a battle on two fronts. We are fighting a plague, we do know. We need a holy war breaking out at the same time. They will not see an ally, Eleonora warned, her moss green eyes flashing. They will see an abomination. A golden demon wearing the skin of a man. Air faith has no room for a paradox like you. They will try to destroy you. Let them try, Naruto said, a subtle, hard edge to his voice. A faith that cannot withstand a single question is not a faith worth having. It is a cage. Perhaps it is time someone rattled the bars. He looked directly at Integra, his sapphire eyes holding hers. We need to know what they know. We need their resources. If they choose to be an enemy, we will deal with them. But we must give them the chance to be something more. Integra stared at him, a silent battle of wills playing out. Her instinct, honed over years of bitter rivalry, was to tell the Vatican to go to hell. But his logic was undeniable. The Nefesh were a global threat. Hellsing, for all its power, could not be everywhere at once. And Naruto's quiet, unshakable confidence was persuasive. He was not asking for her permission, he was providing his strategic counsel as an equal. Fine, she conceded, the word clipped. She turned to Walter. But not here, not in my house. Arrange the meeting on neutral ground. A public space, maximum visibility, minimum tactical advantage for either side. She crushed her cigarillo in a crystal ashtray. Send a reply to Archbishop Maxwell. Tell him we will meet his pet inquisitor at the British Museum. Tomorrow, high noon. The Great Court of the British Museum was a stunning juxtaposition of the ancient and the modern. The original, neoclassical stone of the old reading room was encased beneath a breathtaking, tessellated glass roof that flooded the massive space with pale, English sunlight. As a cathedral dedicated to human history, a vast, echoing chamber filled with the silent, watchful ghosts of 1,000 fallen empires. Tourists drifted through the space like schools of brightly colored fish, their murmurs and the clicking of cameras a constant, gentle hum. It was the perfect picture of public normalcy, a carefully chosen stage for a meeting of monsters. Integra's team was invisible, professionals melting into the crowd. Sarah's, in a stylish trench coat that did little to conceal the bulk of the Harkonnen case she carried, stood near the entrance, her senses on high alert. Eleonora leaned against a pillar, affecting an air of bored detachment that was betrayed by the way her fingers subtly traced warding signs on the cold stone. Integra herself stood at the center of the court, flanked by Walter. Her posture as rigid and unyielding as the Elgin marbles in the next gallery. Naruto stood slightly apart from them, simply observing. He felt the weight of the place, the psychic residue of the countless stolen artifacts that surrounded him. The Rosetta Stone, the sculptures of the Parthenon, the colossal statues of Ramesses II. Each one was a nexus of belief, of history, of human passion and bloodshed. They were all scars of a kind, he realized. Cicatrices. Then, he felt it. A new presence. Not the creeping void of the Nefesh, but something else entirely. A blazing, ferocious, and utterly self-righteous torrent of pure, weaponized faith. It was a bonfire of conviction in the middle of the quiet museum, and it was heading their way. Through the main entrance they came, parting the sea of tourists not through force, but by the sheer, intimidating gravity of their presence. Two figures flanked the leader, a blonde woman with a predatory gaze and a Japanese woman in a traditional nun's habit. Her face a serene, unreadable mask. But the eye was drawn inexorably to the man in the center. Father Alexander Anderson was a walking contradiction. He was tall and lean, with short, spiky blonde hair. A pair of thin, round spectacles perched on his nose, and a gentle, almost beatific smile on his face. He wore the simple cassock of a priest. But he moved with the coiled, lethal grace of a hunting wolf, and the air around him crackled with a barely restrained fanaticism. The long, Bayonet-like blades he favored were not visible, but Sarah's could feel their presence. Like the phantom limb of a coming amputation. "Sir Integra Hellsing," Anderson said, his voice a pleasant, lilting Irish brogue that was utterly at odds with the sheer menace he projected. "Always a pleasure to see the heretic whore of Babylon out and about, enjoying the sunshine. And look, you've brought your pet vampire and a wee forest pagan with ye. A regular menagerie of blasphemy." "Anderson," Integra replied, her voice dripping with ice. "I see you've crawled out from under your rock in Rome. I trust you've brought your master's leash this time." The two leaders glared at each other, their animosity a palpable force. Anderson's smiling gaze then shifted, sliding past Integra to land squarely on Naruto. The smile didn't falter, but his eyes, magnified by his glasses, became cold, analytical. And utterly without mercy, he took a step forward, circling Naruto like a shark appraising a new and bizarre form of prey. He could feel the immense power, but it was all wrong. It was clean. It hummed with life, not death. It felt more like the presence of a saint than a demon, and that, to Anderson, was the most dangerous heresy of all. "And this must be the one," Anderson crooned, his smile widening. "The golden-haired miracle worker. The one who tidied up our little ghoul problem in Rome." He stopped directly in front of Naruto, peering at him intently. "Tell me, creature, what are ye, a new trick of the devil, dressed up in the light to fool the faithful? Or has some poor angel fallen so very, very far from grace?" Naruto met his gaze without blinking. "I am none of those things. Are ye not?" Anderson's hand moved in a blur, pulling a blessed bayonet from his sleeve. It was not an attack, but a test. He held the gleaming, scripture-etched silver blade up to Naruto's face. "Then ye won't mind a little test of faith, will ye now?" The blade, which would have seared the flesh of any unholy creature, did nothing. It simply reflected the calm, sapphire blue of Naruto's eyes. He made no move to pull away. "Your faith is in the object," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying in the vast space. "In the silver, in the holy water, in the words carved into the steel. You believe it holds power. It is a conduit for the power of the Almighty." Anderson hissed, the smile finally dropping, replaced by a scowl of confused fury. "A power that should be scouring the flesh from your bones, demon." "And yet, here I stand," Naruto countered gently. "Perhaps the power is not in the blade. Perhaps it is in the hand that wields it. And perhaps your hand is pointing it at the wrong enemy." Anderson snarled and took a half-step back, sheathing his blade. This was not going as planned. This creature did not react as it should. It did not burn. It did not flinch. It did not posture or threaten. It simply was. "Do not preach to me of enemies, you paradox." He spat. "The word of God is absolute. The holy and the unholy. The light and the dark. There is no place between for a thing like you. You must be one or the other. So choose your confession before I choose it for ye." He spread his arms wide, his voice rising to a preacher's fervent roar that turned the heads of nearby tourists. "For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness?" 2 Corinthians, chapter 6, verse 14. "A good verse," Naruto acknowledged with a nod. "But you assume I am darkness pretending to be light. Have you considered I might be a light your scripture has no name for yet?" He took a step closer, his presence not threatening, but undeniably powerful. "Your book speaks of one world, one God, one heaven, one hell. It is a powerful story, and it has guided millions. But the universe is far older and far larger than one story. My world had its own stories, its own gods, its own power. It was called chakra, the energy of life that connects all things." He held up his hand, and a small, perfectly stable sphere of blue energy, a miniature Rasengan, spun into existence in his palm. It radiated no heat, no malice. It just hummed with a pure, concentrated energy that made the air around it feel clean. "Is this light, or is this darkness, Father Anderson?" Naruto asked. "It is not blessed by your God. It was not born in your hell. It simply is. It is the energy of my own life, my own spirit. Can your faith not make room for a truth that is simply different from your own?" Anderson stared at the spinning sphere, his mind, for the first time in decades, grappling with a concept that did not fit his binary, black and white world. He was a man of absolute certainty, and this creature was forcing him to confront the terrifying possibility of the unknown. His hand twitched, itching for the reassuring certainty of a bayonet. It was in that moment of profound, theological tension that something else happened. Deep in the bowels of the museum, in a climate-controlled vault in the Asiatic collection, a long-forgotten artifact began to resonate. It was a simple-looking thing, a scroll case made of petrified wood and sealed with a complex, ink-drawn formula that no curator had ever been able to decipher. It had been logged as a relic from an obscure, isolationist Japanese clan from the late Edo period. It was, in fact, Otsutsuki in origin. Naruto's colossal life force, his sage energy, his chakra, all of it pulsing in the heart of the museum, was a massive tuning fork, and the scroll case was a bell waiting to be struck. A low, subsonic hum began to emanate from the vault, a vibration that no human could feel but was a deafening roar to the supernaturally sensitive. On the great court floor, the spinning Rasengan in Naruto's hand flickered violently. He looked down at it, a frown creasing his brow. He felt the hum, a strange, deeply unsettling resonance that plucked at the very strings of his soul. It was a familiar energy, an energy he had hoped never to feel again in this new world. Eleonora gasped, her hand flying to a wooden amulet around her neck. A fault line. The earth is screaming. Saris's fangs extended involuntarily. What is that? It feels awful, cold and sharp. Even Anderson felt it, a psychic pressure that felt like sterile, emotionless static, a stark contrast to the passionate fires of his own faith. What devilry is this? He growled, looking around wildly. Naruto's eyes widened, the Rasengan vanishing from his hand. He knew that signature. Cold, clinical, parasitic. Otsutsuki, a remnant of Keigaya's clan, here, in this world. The implications were staggering. Were the Nefesh and the Otsutsuki connected? Had they been drawn here by the same ancient wound? The hum intensified, and for a split second, the air in the center of the court shimmered, distorting like a heat haze. The psychic pressure spiked, and then vanished. The moment passed, but the echo remained. Naruto stood frozen, his mind racing, the confrontation with Anderson completely forgotten. A ghost from his past had just appeared on a battlefield he was only beginning to understand. Thousands of miles away, in a world that spun to the rhythm of a different kind of energy, alarms shrieked. The village hidden in the leaves, Konohagakure, was a thriving metropolis, a blend of ancient tradition and advanced technology. Wooden pagodas stood beside gleaming steel skyscrapers. Ninja in traditional flak jackets conversed on cellular devices. But deep within the fortified walls of the Hyuga clan compound, a place of serene, minimalist tradition, the atmosphere was anything but calm. In a sterile, white sub-level chamber, a dozen Hyuga clan members in lab coats moved with frantic purpose. In the center of the room, a large, suspended sphere of black, receptive crystal, D, assigned to monitor dimensional and exotic energy signatures, was glowing with a furious violet light. Report, a voice commanded, cutting through the noise. Hanabi Hyuga, head of the Hyuga clan, strode into the room. She was no longer the giggling child who had idolized her older sister. She was a woman grown, carrying herself with an innate grace and an earned authority that commanded immediate respect. She wore the formal, high-collared white robes of the clan head, her long, dark hair tied back in a severe but elegant knot. Her pale, pupil-less Byakugan eyes, the legendary Kekkei Genkei of her clan, saw everything. Lady Hanabi, a technician exclaimed, bowing hastily. The Otsutsuki resonance sphere is reacting. We have a confirmed signature match. Class 4, Keigaya level energy spike. It's faint, but unmistakable. Hanabi's perfectly composed expression tightened. Where? That's the problem, my lady, the technician said, pointing to a holographic star chart. It's not in our solar system. It's not even in our dimension. It's coming from the outer sphere. World 73, the uncharted world. A murmur of shock went through the room. The uncharted world was what they called Earth. A planet they were aware of through fractured, ancient Otsutsuki records but had never contacted, deeming it primitive and without chakra. Hanabi walked to the console, her Byakugan flaring to life, the veins around her temples bulging. She stared at the raw data, her vision penetrating layers of information a normal eye could never see. She saw the energy signature, the cold, alien taint of the Otsutsuki. But beneath it, wrapped around it, was another energy signature, one that made her breath catch in her throat. It was vast, warm, brilliant, and achingly, impossibly familiar. It was like feeling the sun on your face after a lifetime in a cave. Naruto, she whispered, the name a ghost on her lips. It couldn't be. He had vanished years ago, after a final, cataclysmic battle with a remnant Otsutsuki cult. Presumed lost in a dimensional rift. The world had mourned its greatest hero and moved on. Yet, there was his chakra signature, intertwined with that of their greatest enemy, in another world. Within the hour, she stood before the Hokage's desk. Konohamaru Sarutobi, now a man in his prime, with a gravity befitting his station, listened to her report, his expression grim. An Otsutsuki threat cannot be ignored, he said, his voice heavy. And the possibility that Naruto is alive, we cannot risk a full-scale expedition. It could be a trap. We need a scout, someone who can get in, assess the situation, and get out without causing an international incident. Someone with the vision to see the truth. There was only one choice. The Byakugan is the only tool for this mission, Hanabi said, her voice firm. Leaving no room for argument. I will go. It will be dangerous, Hanabi. You will be alone, in a world without a shinobi system to support you. Hanabi's gaze was as sharp and clear as a diamond. The Hyuga do not shy from danger. And if there is even a sliver of a chance that Naruto Uzumaki is alive, then I have no other choice. I will find him. Her mission was approved. As she stood on the teleportation platform, a marvel of post-war Uzumaki seal mastery and scientific innovation, she closed her eyes for a moment. She wore a discreet, dark gray tactical suit beneath a simple civilian cloak. The only sign of her clan a small, white insignia on her shoulder. She was a scalpel, preparing to make the first incision into a world unknown. Her Byakugan activated, her vision expanding beyond the room, beyond the village, seeing the flow of chakra in the world around her. She focused on the faint, distant thread of that impossible, sun-like energy, her target, her anchor. A mixture of grim determination, sacred duty, and a flicker of something more, a long-buried hope, settled in her heart. The world dissolved into a torrent of light and color. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Ghosts of a Concrete Garden. The aftermath of the museum incident left a charged, discordant silence in the Hellsing Command Center. Alexander Anderson and his Iscariot fanatics had retreated, not with the fury of a thwarted enemy, but with the confused, simmering silence of a zealot who had witnessed a miracle that didn't fit their holy book. They had come seeking a demon to slay and had found a philosophical conundrum wearing a human face. For now, they were a snarling dog that had been shown a confusing card trick, momentarily distracted but no less dangerous. For Naruto, however, their departure brought no relief. The fleeting, razor-sharp resonance of the Otsutsuki artifact had overshadowed everything. It was a ghost from his previous life, a signature of the very power T had nearly unmade his world and had been the catalyst for his own disappearance. It cannot be a coincidence, he said, his voice low and hard. He stood before the holographic globe, which now displayed a detailed map of the United Kingdom. A single, pulsing red dot had appeared over the city of Manchester. The Nefesh are drawn to these scars. That artifact in the museum was a scar. It woke up when I used my chakra. Now, this new signal appears. It's the same energy. Otsutsuki. Integra stood beside him, a fresh cigarillo burning between her fingers. She regarded him with a cool, appraising gaze. The dynamics of their alliance had shifted again. This was no longer just her war, her world's problem. This was personal for him. You are certain? She asked. I have fought this energy before, Naruto replied. His sapphire eyes clouded with a grim memory. I know its texture, its coldness. It feels like a surgeon's scalpel, utterly devoid of emotion or life. It is the antithesis of the sage energy I wield. And it is a beacon. If I can feel it, so can the Nefesh. Then we deploy, Integra stated, already turning to issue orders. I will assemble Strike Team Gamma. We can be airborne in 20 minutes. No, Naruto said, his voice stopping her cold. This is not a mission for your soldiers, Sir Integra. Not yet. He turned to face her fully. The creature that wounded Iluka. Road and the creature that requires a witch's ritual to contain are one thing. But this is different. The Otsutsuki clan were not mere monsters. They were reality warpers, genetic parasites who edited worlds with their power and returned later to harvest them. Their artifacts are not just passive objects, they can have psychological, and even dimensional, effects on their surroundings. I don't know what we're walking into, but it's a problem from my world. It requires a solution from my world. I will go alone. His statement was not a request. It was a declaration of jurisdiction. Integra's jaw tightened. She was a woman who commanded, who was obeyed without question. But Naruto was not her subordinate. He was a sovereign power. To challenge him on this would be to shatter their fragile alliance. More than that, she recognized the truth in his words. Her men were prepared for ghouls and vampires. Not for cosmic gardeners who harvested planets. You will maintain an open communication link, she commanded, acquiescing with the hard-won pragmatism of a true leader. You will provide full intel on what you find. If the situation exceeds your stated capabilities, you will signal for reinforcement. Understood. Perfectly. Naruto agreed with a nod. He then looked at Sarah's and Eleonora. Stay here. Protect this place. This is not your fight. Sarah's looked like she wanted to protest, her loyalty and newfound admiration warring with his direct order. Eleonora simply inclined her head, her moss-green eyes filled with a deep, ancient understanding. Be wary of the echoes, Sun Sage, the witch warned. A place poisoned by such a power will not be empty. It will be haunted by more than just shadows. The journey north to Manchester was a descent from the orderly, historic grandeur of London into the proud, wounded heart of the industrial age. Naruto traveled by a mundane, high-speed train, a solitary, anonymous figure watching the green fields of the home counties blur bleed into the red brick terraces and skeletal, cathedral-like factories of the north. He felt the energy signature growing stronger with every mile, a cold, sharp note in the symphony of life, a dissonance that set his teeth on edge. He disembarked at Piccadilly Station and moved through the bustling city, a ghost in the machine. His senses guided him, pulling him away from the vibrant city center and towards the eastern districts. Towards the silent, forgotten landscapes of post-industrial decay. He walked through Ancoats, a place that had once been the thrumming, beating heart of the world's textile industry. Now, it was a graveyard of giants. Vast, red brick mills stood empty, their thousands of windows like vacant, staring eyes. Canals, once arteries of commerce, were now choked with stagnant, rainbow-slicked water. Skeletal iron bridges spanned gullies filled with rubble and the stubborn, defiant green of weeds. The air tasted of coal dust, rust, and damp brick. It was a place of profound melancholy, a concrete garden where the ghosts of industry still lingered, and it was here that the Otsutsuki's cold song was the loudest. He found the epicenter in a sprawling, abandoned locomotive works. A massive, brick and iron shed, its roof long since collapsed, stood open to the perpetually overcast sky. Twisted railway lines led into its cavernous maw like the petrified entrails of a metal beast. The silence here was different from the tomb-like quiet of the Roman catacombs. It was an industrial silence, the unnatural stillness of a place built for deafening noise, now fallen mute. And it was crawling with nefesh. He didn't need to feel for them, he could see them now. The Otsutsuki artifact was acting as a lens, a focusing array, making them more physically manifest. They were no longer just ripples in the air but coalesced forms of utter blackness, their edges sharp and defined against the gray backdrop of the decaying factory. They swarmed around a central point deep within the structure, drawn to it like moths to a black flame. Naruto walked through the colossal, rusted gates, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The nefesh turned as one, their collective, soulless attention fixing on the brilliant, incandescent feast that had just walked into their larder. But as they surged towards him, something strange happened. The air grew colder, and a psychic pressure, thick and cloying, slammed into his mind. It wasn't the blank, consuming pressure of the nefesh. This was something else. It was directed, personal. The rusted, derelict train carriages around him shimmered and dissolved. The brick walls of the factory faded. Suddenly, he was standing in a forest of towering trees, the air thick with the smell of blood and scorched earth. He heard a voice, choked and weak. Naruto. Is this the end? He spun around. Neji Hyuga was impaled on a massive wooden spike, a ragged, fatal hole in his chest. His Byakugan eyes, unfocused, stared at Naruto, not with accusation, but with a weary, final trust. The memory was so vivid, so perfect, that Naruto could feel the phantom sensation of Neji's blood on his hands, the splintered wood against his own skin. A nefesh lunged from the phantom image of Neji's body, its form a blur of absolute nothingness. Naruto's reaction was automatic, forged in 1,000 real battles. He sidestepped, a golden blade of pure sage energy extending from his hand, and bisected the creature. It dissolved with a silent hiss. But the vision didn't fade. The factory was gone, replaced by the battlefield of the Fourth Great Ninja War. This is their new trick, Naruto whispered to himself, his jaw tight. The artifact isn't just a beacon. It's an amplifier. It's reading my mind, my memories, and giving the nefesh the ability to project them. To use my own past as a weapon against me. Another vision flared to life. The Valley of the End. A younger, desperate version of himself stood across from Sasuke, who was wreathed in the dark. Malevolent power of the curse mark. The hatred, the pain, the bitter failure of that day washed over him, a tide of remembered anguish. From within Sasuke's phantom form, another nefesh struck. Naruto moved, parrying, striking, his movements economical and deadly. He was a whirlwind of golden energy in a nightmare of his own making. He fought through the rain-swept landscape of his final battle with pain. The smell of ozone from Jiraiya's final stand on his tongue, the weight of every promise he had struggled to keep pressing down on him. This was not a battle of power. It was a battle of will. The nefesh, empowered by the Otsutsuki artifact, were trying to drown him in his own regrets, to make him falter, to make his brilliant life force flicker with doubt so they could extinguish it. But they had chosen the wrong mind to invade. Naruto Uzumaki had been forged in the crucible of loss and failure. He had carried the hatred of his village, the burden of a tailed beast. The deaths of his masters and comrades. These ghosts were not strangers to him. They were his constant companions. He had made his peace with them long ago. "You think this is my weakness?" he said, his voice ringing out in the phantom landscape, a challenge to the soulless things that hunted him. He stood his ground as a dozen nefesh surged from a vision of the fallen shinobi alliance. "You think my past cripples me?" He closed his eyes. The phantoms of Neji, of Jiraiya, of his parents, flickered around him. He did not push them away. He embraced them. "My past is not a prison," he declared, his voice resonating with absolute power. "It is my foundation." He opened his eyes, and they were no longer just sapphire blue. They were blazing gold, the vertical slit of the toad sage visible. An immense, visible torrent of golden sage energy erupted from his body, a miniature sun igniting in the heart of the decaying factory. The psychic projections shattered like glass, the phantoms of his past dissolving into motes of light. The factory returned, the rusted metal and decaying brick reappearing. The nefesh were thrown back, their forms sizzling and destabilizing in the overwhelming torrent of pure life. In the center of the swarm, Naruto saw it. The artifact, a black, crystalline shard, no larger than his hand, humming with cold, alien power as it hovered a foot off the ground. He prepared to end it. And then he felt it. A new presence. Not a void, not a memory, real. It was a chakra signature, so blindingly familiar and so utterly impossible that it made him freeze for a single, critical heartbeat. From a high, skeletal gantry overlooking the factory floor, she had watched the entire battle. Hanabi Hyuga moved with the silent grace of a predator, her form wrapped in a dark, nondescript cloak. Her Byakugan was active, her vision a 360-degree panorama of flowing energy. She had tracked the colossal, sun-like chakra signature to this desolate place. And then she had seen him. Older, harder, but unmistakably Naruto Uzumaki. She had watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as he fought the things she could only perceive as holes in reality, absolute voids in the flow of chakra. She saw the psychic assault, the way the very air around him shimmered and warped with foreign energy. And she saw his response. The eruption of sage energy, a golden nova of life that was more powerful, more pure than anything she had ever witnessed. It was the Naruto of legend, amplified 1,000-fold. It was him. He was alive. She had her orders. Observe, assess, report. But seeing him in battle, seeing the sheer number of those void creatures, she made a command decision. She needed to confirm contact. She needed to know what he had become. She dropped from the gantry, a silent shadow. She landed without a sound and flowed through the remaining chaos, her movements a poem of deadly efficiency. He was focused on the swarm, on the black shard. His back was to her. It was the perfect opening. Naruto felt the shift in the air a split second before the attack. He turned, his sage-enhanced senses screaming, and his eyes widened. A figure in a dark cloak was upon him, their hand extended. 2 fingers jabbed forward in the classic gentle fist stance. It wasn't an attack meant to kill, but to disable, striking a key tenketsu point in his shoulder to disrupt his chakra flow. He reacted on pure, ingrained instinct, his own hand coming up to parry, deflecting the strike by a mere inch. His palm brushed against hers. In that single moment of contact, he felt the pure, distinct chakra of the Hyuga clan. And he knew. The figure's hood fell back. Long, dark hair, pale, pupil-less eyes that saw the very soul of him. The proud, regal features of a clan she was born to lead. She was a woman now. No longer a girl, her face etched with a maturity and authority that was startling. "Hanabi," he breathed, his voice a choked whisper of disbelief. She stared back at him, her own composure cracking as she saw him clearly, heard her name spoken in that impossible, familiar voice. The shock was a physical blow. Uzumaki. Naruto. The name was a question, a prayer, an accusation. You are supposed to be dead." Before either of them could say another word, the Nefesh, recovering from his blast, surged forward, taking advantage of the momentary distraction. Hanabi didn't hesitate. Her body spun in a blur of motion. 8 trigrams 64 palms. Her hands became a dizzying whirlwind, striking not the Nefesh themselves, but the air around them, releasing bursts of focused chakra from her tenketsu points. The attack, designed to strike a living creature's chakra network, had a strange effect on the voids. The blasts of pure chakra disrupted their cohesion, causing them to flicker and shred like faulty holograms. It wasn't a killing blow, but it bought them precious seconds. "We need to destroy that shard," Naruto yelled, shaking off his shock and pointing to the black crystal. Hanabi's Byakugan immediately focused on it. She saw it clearly. The cold, alien chakra of the Otsutsuki radiating from it, and the way the void creatures were tethered to it, drawing power and stability from its presence. "Together," she commanded, her voice ringing with the authority of a clan leader. There was no more time for questions. They fell into step, a aimless partnership born of a shared past and a shared battlefield. Naruto became the spearhead, a blazing sun of sage energy, carving a path through the swarm. Hanabi was the whirlwind at his back, her gentle fist a peerless defense. Her 360-degree vision calling out threats before they could materialize. They moved as one, the last son of the Uzumaki and the heiress of the Hyuga, a legend and a leader. Reunited in a battle for a world that was not their own. They reached the shard. "It's feeding them. Shatter it," Hanabi cried. Naruto didn't hesitate. He thrust his hand forward, a Rasengan roaring to life in his palm. He slammed it into the black crystal. There was a moment of absolute silence as the rotational power of the Rasengan met the cold, static energy of the Otsutsuki artifact. Then, with a deafening, piercing shriek that was not sound but pure psychic feedback, the shard fractured. It exploded into a million motes of black dust, which then sublimated into nothing. Cut off from their anchor, the remaining Nefesh convulsed. Their forms destabilized, unraveled, and, one by one, they dissolved into the gray Manchester air, leaving behind only a profound, ringing silence. The battle was over. Naruto stood panting, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer emotional whiplash of the last 5 minutes. He turned to face her. Hanabi stood a few feet away, her defensive stance slowly relaxing. Her Byakugan still active as she scanned their surroundings for any residual threats. The adrenaline of combat faded, replaced by the heavy, impossible reality of their reunion. They stood in silence for a long moment. 2 ghosts from a dead world, staring at each other in the ruins of a forgotten factory. "How?" Naruto finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of years of confusion and loss. "That is my question for you, Naruto-sama," Hanabi replied, her voice formal, strained, the honorific a relic of a life he had left behind. "Konoha has mourned you for 10 years. He looked at her, at the strength in her eyes, the grace in her stance, the subtle lines of care and responsibility on her face. He saw not just Hinata's little sister, but the formidable leader of a great clan. And he realized he couldn't give her a simple answer. He couldn't just tell her the truth. He had to show her. He let the golden glow of his sage mode recede. He was just a man again, standing in the gloom. He looked at his own hands, then back at her. "It's complicated, Hanabi," he said, his voice heavy. "I didn't die. I changed. I became something else." He met her powerful, all-seeing gaze. "Let's walk. I have a long story to tell you." Chapter 5 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.